All right, welcome everyone to our second segment of Next Steps in Your Career. We'd like to welcome all of you. My name is Rima Žuraitis. I am the president of JAV Lietuvian-American, the North American Lithuanian Youth Association. A little bit about us. We are geared towards youth ages 18 to 35, and we do our roots are based in protest. Our parents, used our organization to protest for Lithuanian freedom. And now we're kind of working more towards helping young people get, further advanced into their careers or into their careers. And that's kind of what we're doing tonight. And without further ado, I will hand it off to our moderator, Jonas Haus.
Ačiū. Labas, aš esu Jonas Haus. I'm the vice president of JAV LJS. Really appreciate all of you being here and joining us for this second session of what we hope will be a really good series. And the whole point of this is to bring young Lithuanians together, not just from the US. We have our friends from Canada here joining us on the panel as well, and as well as attending in the audience. And the whole point is to help people get their careers started. We all have now, been along in our careers for a little while, so we want to pass on some of the lessons learned, some of the best practices that we've found as we've gone along our way. The last session was really great. We had some great panelists from various different industries. We covered a lot of ground, but we wanted to cover some different ground this time. So we have some great panelists, again, from different parts of the U.S. I'm in D.C., though it looks like I'm, on Get Them on the Prospectus right now. But we have some panelists from the East Coast, from Chicago, from the West Coast, from Canada. We're really all over the place, and we're in a lot of different industries. So we hope to provide these different perspectives for those of you who are in attendance. We're also recording this. So if you had not seen our previous session, we have the link available on our Facebook page. Please take a look at that. We're recording this one, so that way those of you who want to take a look back at what we've discussed, or send along the link to your friends who were not able to join us. Something else that we did for the last session that we'd like to do again is to pass along one-pagers of some of the best practices and lessons learned that we discussed. So we're going to do that again tonight. Those are just kind of quick tip sheets for you as you go along in your career, some different tips that we've thought have been helpful and want to pass on to you. So we're going to summarize that later. But let's get to our real discussion tonight. This is about strategies for career development. So let's go around. I think our tile is a little bit different for everybody. But let me start first introducing myself. As I said, I'm the vice president of JAV LJS. Professionally, I'm a lawyer and a lobbyist in DC. I work for the Wireless Infrastructure Association. We are the trade association that represents companies that build our wireless networks, that provide connectivity. But my association with Lietuva is because of my grandparents who were Lithuanian Americans. My grandfather was involved in a lot of different Lithuanian relief organizations, Ateitininkai, the Voice of America. He was a broadcaster for a long time with that. So that's my connection. And I was actually not connected for a little while, but I came back into Lietuva through Šokiai Šventės. And I'm also the finance director for the Šokiai Šventė that was supposed to be last month, but is going to be next summer in Philadelphia. So that's how I know the first panelist who I'd like to introduce, Dainius Volertas, who is from Philly, but he's actually in New York right now. So Dainius, why don't you introduce yourself?
As Jonas said, my name is Dainius Volertas. I'm originally from Philadelphia, a transplant to Hoboken, New Jersey. Unlike some people, I wanted to broaden my horizons. But I work in the water treatment industry. I graduated with a chemical engineering degree from Penn State. I wanted to do engineering work my entire life, even as a kid. So I always knew I wanted to do engineering. But I realized that I don't want to be in a lab all day. And that brought me to what I do now, which is a technical sales, technical consulting role, mainly focused in the greater New York City metropolitan area. And then from there, it's been working with the company's younger employees to help train them and develop their skill sets. As Jonas said, my Vibe runs deep. My parents are actually the head organizers for the Philadelphia Šokių Šventė. I plan to dance and plan to participate. I've played in the basketball teams. I went to Dainava, and it's just been something that's always been part of my life. It's just part of who I am. That's a little bit about who I am and why I'm involved in this wonderful organization.
Awesome, ačiū Dainiau. Erika, let's go to somebody else who's on the East Coast.
Labas vakaras visiems. My name is Erika Gedvilaitė. Originally I was born in Lithuania in Kaunas, and then we moved to New Jersey in 2003, and that's how I became part of the St. Andrew's Lithuanian Church in Philadelphia, where I met Dainius and his family, and where I'm still part of. I am actually a computational biologist. I work at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York City. I'm a scientist. I did my bachelor's at Rutgers University in genetics, and then I went to Penn State. Go Nittany. And I did a master's in biotech, and that's how I became very intrigued in cancer research, and how we can help people. I was born in Lithuania. I'm true Lithuanian. I'm part of the New York Professionals Club. I was also part of the Lithuanian Youth Association's board members. So I love Lithuania and hope to help everyone that I can help.
Great, ačiū Erika. Andro, you're next.
Yeah, ačiū Jonai. Labas vakaras visi. My name is Andris Utz. Originally, I was born and raised in Chicago, and married my wife, who's Canadian-Lithuanian. We moved to the Toronto area in 2007, so we've been in Canada for about 14 years now. And we came this way due to a work opportunity through the employer at the time, Northern Trust Bank, which is a storied 130-year-old financial institution in Chicago. So a little bit about my background. Growing up in Chicago, I attended Lithuanian schools, scouts, dance groups, all the fun stuff that the Jaunimas does, part of Jaunimo Sąjunga, hosting all sorts of parties at that time and attending all sorts of things at Daily Plaza in terms of protests. And so, it was very active. My mom was very active. My dad was not Lithuanian, but as you can tell by my last name, which is a German name, but I grew up thinking I was Lithuanian, and that's how I feel I am. But in terms of my education, I completed a bachelor's at Columbia College, Chicago, in a completely different field that I'm working in now. I was going to go into sound engineering and film post-production audio, but decided that was not, even though it's a passion of mine, was something from a career perspective I didn't want to pursue. So then I ended up attending St. Xavier University in Chicago, starting out taking a few master's level courses because I thought I was going to pursue a CFP designation, which is Certified Financial Planner. So St. Xav's had a program where you could take a few courses, MBA level courses, and get a certificate in financial planning, which I did. And then they said, hey, since you're here, you don't need to do the GMAT since you did so well. Why don't you just finish off a master's degree? So I completed, instead of doing an MBA, I concentrated a little more to the investment side of things. So it completed a Master of Science in Finance with a concentration in investments. So from that point, started my career working in the financial services field. Been doing that for a little over 20 years now. Here in Toronto, I work for a firm called Aviso Wealth. It recently was a merger of 3 different companies, a mutual fund company, a self-directed investment platform similar to E-Trade in the US. It's called Q-Trade here in Canada. And I work for the institutional side of the business, where our clients are all portfolio managers. So they have their own set of clients that they provide financial advice to and trade direction to. And in my role, what I do is I manage all those portfolio manager relationships. So I help them setting up accounts, onboarding new clients, dealing with any sort of more complicated issues. So I've been doing that for about a little over a year now, and I really enjoy it.
Awesome. Ačiū, Andro. Daiva, tell us about yourself.
Ačiū, labas visi. I'm Daiva Nielsen. I'm an assistant professor at McGill University, so I'm also Canadian. It's nice to have some fellow Canadians on the panel. So my background is in nutritional epidemiology, and I'm interested in studying various contributors to eating behaviors, weight status, chronic disease risk. Particularly, I'm interested in genetics and environmental contributors and how they may interact to influence eating habits and health outcomes. I did my doctorate at the University of Toronto. That's where I'm from. So Andros, we may have crossed paths at some events in the past. I went on to do my postdoctoral training in Boston at Harvard Medical School in a medical genetics lab. And I was very fortunate that when the McGill position opened, I applied. It was my first time applying for a faculty position, and fortunately I got it. So I love what I do. I'm so happy to be at McGill. It's a terrific institution. And I like that there's a lot of kind of US connections between McGill and some of the universities in the United States. My husband is Lithuanian as well. And so my lietuvybė really is with my family, like a lot of us, strong connections to my grandparents and growing up with their traditions, going to Maironio mokykla on Saturdays, participating in dance and choir groups and whatnot. And I love all the šventės, dainų šventė, šokių šventė. What's really been nice about lietuvybė is having those community connections wherever you move to. And so maybe some of the panelists have had this experience that, you know, I've lived in a few different cities over the course of my education and training, and anywhere that I moved, I was able to connect with fellow Lithuanians. And that was always a really nice experience to have those connections. So, yeah, ačiū.
All right, Evelina, are those surfboards behind you?
Yes, they are. I'm in LA, so why wouldn't there be surfboards, right?
Yeah, tell us about yourself, what you do when you're not surfing, or surfing as well.
Labas vakaras, good evening, everyone. My name is Evelina Zaveckas. I am a nuclear security consultant. I currently work with on a project with the International Atomic Energy Agency. In a few words, nuclear security deals with the prevention of nuclear terrorism, and we are working on completing a nuclear security mission in one of the countries in Southeast Asia. My academic background is in social sciences. I have a master's in international relations from New York University, and I also have a certificate in nuclear security from the World Institute for Nuclear Security. I was actually born and grew up in Lithuania. I moved to the US in 2006. So lietuvybė was my life. It was, you know, the only identity I had. And I could mention that since I moved to the US, I did have a job. I worked at the Consulate General of Lithuania in Los Angeles for a few years. So I got to know the Los Angeles Lithuanian-American community very, very well. And it just really enriched my experience while living in California. Now, I'm very happy we're doing this webinar today. There's so much to talk about, and I'm happy to share my experiences with all of you, especially those interested in the international relations studies or those who just recently graduated. Thank you.
Ačiū. Well, there is so much for us to discuss tonight, so much for us to dive into. I want to pick up a little bit on what we discussed with our last webinar with our previous panel. And one of the kind of important things that our panelists discussed in terms of the job search, you know, when you're looking for a job and trying to find the right fit. But one of the most important things that I think you need to ask is, what are your passions? What are you really interested in? And so we covered a lot of ground there, and our panelists had a lot to offer. But I wanted to raise a similar question with all of you about how you found your passion, because all of you are very accomplished and in different fields, very different fields. So how did you get to where you are? Erica, maybe we could go to you first.
So I fell in love with science from very, very early on. I was very lucky when I came to US to be in a school system that was driven by science. And I know I'm very privileged to have had that experience where I was able to take a lot of STEM classes and take a lot of, we actually had electives in genetics and physiology and such. So I got introduced to all of these topics, and genetics just kind of fascinated me. Just, you can look at DNA and know diseases and track how things change. So that kind of picked up my interest in science. And then when I decided to go to university, I was looking around the tri-state area, so New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, and Rutgers was the perfect choice for me because it was a huge school and it had one of the first genetics programs in the United States. And it was really known for its research in Tourette syndromes and other the genetic disorders. So I actually, when I got in, I was a pre-med student, but after a few semesters, maybe even a semester, I transferred directly into genetics and was very fortunate to be selected and got into a lab that was actually working on neurological disorders. So very similar to what Daiva is working on. So it was Tourette's and bipolar and schizophrenia. And even delving into some of the predispositions in alcoholism. So that was a really great experience that I had for 2.5 years. And then having graduated with a bachelor's in genetics, as a scientist, bachelor's is hard to, how can I say, with a bachelor's, it's hard to establish a career. It's a great stepping stone, but you need, as people say, another piece of paper. So biotechnology and just industry really interested me. So I applied to a program at Penn State, which is a master's in biotechnology, which is accelerated course and degree that not only introduced me to more of the traditional laboratory, which is more of like what you call your wet lab, your experiments, but also to industry, to writing patents and starting a startup and all of that information. So once I finished my master's, I had the background of the genetics as well as more of the biotechnology. And through all of that, I focused myself more in computational biology, which is essentially marrying genetics, mathematics, statistics into one. And I knew I always wanted to analyze data, to go deep into research. So when the opportunity came up at Memorial, it was just a great fit. So for me, it's like a long life, just pieces that just led me to where I am right now.
Yeah, hopping off of what Erica said, I loved the sciences from the very beginning. I always knew I wanted to do engineering, even though I was terrible at physics. And they say chemical engineering is a math, physics, and chemistry degree as opposed to an engineering degree. But I knew it's what I wanted to do. what I didn't realize is what industry was like and what working at an actual lab was like. And I have to give credit to Erica, where, you know, working in a lab, I quickly realized it's not something I wanted to do. I'm somewhat of a social person, and you know, I realized that I need to work in a position that allows me to interact with people, you know, work together with groups to you know, go after a targeted agenda to complete a task. And that's what really led me to my sales, you know, technical consulting role, which was through a presentation in one of my classes. It was a junior seminar talking about the various fields you could get into, and it's actually at the company I work with now, and my current mentor who gave that presentation. And it just opened my perspective as to, you know, this is a field that I could pursue. You know, I never thought of myself as a salesperson, but you know, I like talking to people and I like interacting with them, and I work well with people. And it just kind of dawned on me that, you know, this may be something I'm interested in pursuing. And the first thing I did after that class was walk up to him, and lo and behold, that's how I got my first internship. You know, so you use your passions to figure out, you know, what you want to do, but as you develop and as you go through life, your passions will shift. Or as Andres said, you know, you may have a passion, but you may not realize that you want to make a career out of it. You know, so that's just how I developed into where I am now.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Andro, because he kind of kicked it to you with that comment. Maybe you can tell a little bit more. You mentioned when you were introducing yourself that you initially were not going to pursue a career in finance. Were there any maybe classes that you took? Were there any internships that you had that led you to this position and to finding your passion?
Sure. Yeah. Let me just say that my path was completely different than Etika and Dinas in terms of knowing what I wanted to do. I had no idea what I wanted to do. So initially, I first followed my heart and my passion, which was aviation. I started at a small university in Romeoville, Illinois called Lewis University. They had an aviation / business management program where basically what you do is it's a path into becoming a commercial pilot. And so I started taking my flight lessons and all that. Loved it. Just loved that whole. I love flying, and if I could do it, I would still be doing it today as a career. But at that time, the market changed drastically in aviation. There were a lot of bankruptcies, and companies stopped hiring. They were only hiring pilots with military experience, thousands of hours. And for me to compete with that would have been next to impossible. And after spending, you know, you would have had to spend close to, like, at that time, upwards of $50,000 to get all your licensing. It just didn't make sense to me to do that as a career when it looked like a dead end. So I jumped into my next passion, which is music. At the time, in Chicago with a bunch of friends, we had a band and we were playing weddings and parties and at bars, and I really enjoy it. And so I thought, hey, why don't I try to make a career or something out of music? Maybe not a musician, but pursue a music recording. And then so I started to transfer over to Columbia College, where I ultimately completed the degree in sound engineering, and also specifically sound for film, which is post-production work, which is really cool. But again, at that time in my life, I was starting to get into a serious relationship, and that would have meant moving from Chicago to California and probably waiting tables with potentially no career path in that field. But at that time, it just, from a family perspective, didn't make sense for me to do that. So I still enjoy it. I still am involved in music in different ways, but just didn't pursue it from a career perspective. I did do an internship actually in Chicago at a radio station, which was slightly different than sound engineering, but it did have, there is some crossover in terms of the skill sets required for it. but realized that radio was a crazy field and not very stable. So, but it was a lot of fun doing morning shows. At that time, I worked with radio personality Steve Dahl, who now has his own, I guess, webcast, podcast. But ultimately, what led me to financial services, my dad at the time was an estate planning attorney, and he was working with a few people, insurance agents and other financial planners who were very successful. And my dad kind of prodded me. He's like, hey, take a look at it. I did have an interest in investing. I had already started tinkering with a small portfolio of my own for retirement. I thought, hey, why not? I'm interested in it. It seems pretty cool. Let's see if I can make a go of it. So that's how I ended up at St. Zav's taking a few of those master's level courses. And once I dove into those courses and got deeper into it, realized, hey, yeah, you know what? I enjoy this. I like it. I understand it. I am a numbers guy as well. So it made sense. It was a good fit for me. And, just jumped in and got an entry-level job working what's now called Deutsche Bank, but there was a firm that they had purchased called Scudder Investments, Kemper Funds, the mutual fund company based out of Chicago at the time, and started in their call center. So started fielding calls. I got mutual fund licensed and learned a heck of a lot on the phones. And that's really where I got my feet wet and got a taste for the business. And from that point was kind of a springboard into different areas. And in terms of, I've worked with clients directly, client-facing roles. I've worked in operations, they call back office, which led me to being a relationship manager today, which is sort of a cross of all those things where there's sales involved, there's have that product knowledge of what is an ETF, what is a mutual fund, how do those things work, is it right for the client, what are the fee structures, how to open an account, what goes into operating a financial services company. So when I deal with clients, I know all the different facets of the business because of my experiences up until now, which has been really beneficial.
I knew I wanted to work in the UN system since I was a kid. I remember first time I learned about the United Nations, I knew I wanted to work there. I had no idea how to get there, but fast forward some years, I graduated with a degree in political science in Lithuania, and then I moved to the United States, where I completed a master's degree in international relations. And I did an internship at the UN headquarters in New York. It was with the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, so it had nothing to do with nuclear issues. And after I graduated, I actually found myself not much closer to getting a job in the field that I was really passionate about, and that interest in nuclear issues actually started in graduate school. I took a class in nuclear non-proliferation, and that was it. I knew that this was what I wanted to pursue as a professional path. I wrote my thesis on Iran's nuclear program and ended up taking another internship after graduating. I did an internship remotely with a think tank in DC, but I was one of those people who just couldn't afford to keep doing that, and I think many of us can't, and I think it's not talked about enough. So I did take some entry-level jobs in California that were sort of related to my field, such as the position at the Consulate General of Lithuania, which was a fantastic opportunity at the time, but again, it was not in the specific issue area that I was interested in. So what I had to do, I had to work harder. I had to find time after work or on the weekends and just keep working on my own and just figuring out the way to break into the field that I was interested in. So what I ended up doing and what worked was submitting a paper for a conference. I saw a call for papers for one of the conferences at the hosted by the International Atomic Energy Agency, and I submitted my piece as an independent researcher. And my paper got accepted. I was invited to present as a panelist in Austria, and it was a wonderful networking opportunity. I actually was given a travel grant, so I do not have to spend money to travel to Austria to do all this. And after meeting so many people in the field and having this amazing opportunity to talk to everyone in the in the nuclear field at the conference, that led to a consultancy position with the agency. So I think it's a good example on how you have to work hard and be bold sometimes, but just sort of persevere. If your dreams may not be, it may not appear that they're coming true, or your life is dragging you some other direction, but you keep wanting that opportunity that you want, that you are prepared for, that you're trained for. So I think there's some lessons to be learned from my experience.
I really like that. I guess I'm also one of those people that is, I guess, marrying her passion and her professional life in one. Professionally, I work also in finance, but not quite in the same vein as Andrius. I work more on the data sales side of it. But my passion is in international relations and history, specifically Lithuanian history. I'm also a fellow UN nerd, so it's really nice to meet another one. I did model UN all the way through the end of college and internships with United Nations stuff as well. So, kindred spirits. But I think, pursuing, sometimes, your paths will, not exactly converge. And for me, working on a documentary and then also, kind of still being interested in my professional life where, I'm trying to pursue a degree in international political economy, for my master's, it's just kind of one of those things where it is possible to do both. You just have to work harder, like Evelina said, to kind of make sure that you can get to where you want to be. So.
And that's great. Thank you for sharing that. And, it seems that some of us, or many of you have advanced degrees. You've gone to grad school after undergrad, maybe, there were different twists and turns along the way. For me, I went to law school, but it was 3 years after undergrad. I tried a few different jobs in the political space. That was always my goal. But I ended up thinking that I probably needed to go to law school at some time if I wanted to continue in that sort of career path. And it ended up, law school was a lot of work, a lot of literal blood, sweat, and tears in some cases. But on balance, it ended up working out fine. And I have the job today because I interned there during law school. But Daiva, your career field is very different, and you're in academia. So you are in the world of grad school. Could you talk to us a little bit more about how you decided to pursue that? And ultimately, I think something that would be really good for us to discuss for our attendees is whether grad school is really worthwhile, whether it's necessary or not.
Very nice questions. So I'm probably a bit biased because I work in academia, like you said, but my own graduate experience was really wonderful. I think people who have really good experiences end up continuing on in academia. I've seen that so many times. So the importance of a good mentor really can't be overstated. And I had wonderful mentors throughout my training. So I really have to credit them for where I ended up getting. So for me, the path, it wasn't non-linear, but I was more sort of flexible and open to where I would end up. And initially I thought I would be a high school teacher, and I always liked sciences. And I actually have my degree is in math, but I did nutrition as kind of this odd aside, because my mochite was always cooking and talking about vitamins and minerals and health. And so I thought, okay, I'll do this nutrition major because I like it. But I thought I would do math and biology in high school. But I started volunteering in university in different nutrition research labs, and I loved it. So for me, that was kind of the first, I guess, insight into what I would maybe end up doing. And so I think volunteering, if you're in your undergraduate years, is a really good way of getting some, exposure to what could be going on. And if you like that kind of field, if you like the work. And I did a few different labs. So I had sort of clinical nutrition experience, bench science experience, then getting more into the data side. And that's where it kind of really clicked with my interests in math, that I liked doing the statistics. I liked looking at the data. And so I just kind of kept going with it. And I went through grad school, got a scholarship to do a postdoc. And even then it was just still kind of like, well, I like what I'm doing. I'll just keep doing it. So I just kind of took opportunities as they came. And when the faculty position opening was circulated and I saw it for McGill, I just applied and it worked out for me. And I love what I'm doing. So, for me, the pieces all kind of came together nicely, and I just sort of followed the opportunities as they came. In terms of whether it's worth it to do grad school, like, this is my bias, but I definitely think it's worth it, because you have this opportunity to work really closely on a topic, and hopefully you get to choose what you're passionate about. And so that can really help you understand, do you really want to take this to the next level? I find that the master's is a point where people really decide, do I want to stop here, or do I like this so much that I want to go to the next level and do a PhD? And so for me, I knew I wanted the PhD, and I didn't even finish my master's. I fast-tracked. So it started as a master's, but transferred to the PhD program after a year. So it was pretty apparent to me that I liked what I was doing, and I just kept going with it. But I found that graduate school also really developed not just my research skills and analytical skills and just kind of like the tasks, but the skills and the tasks that I needed to do my work, but also the communication skills. And probably a lot of us will say that you have to know how to communicate what you do. And if it's in oral presentations or writing. In academia, we write all the time, grant applications, papers. So it's really important to have good communication skills. And I got a lot of that just from really being immersed in the work. So that's why I would say, I think for anybody who's kind of wrapping up their undergrad and deciding, okay, do I want to try grad school or not? I think the master's is a wonderful training experience. And I think it's very highly valued by employers, and they realize that students have really kind of gone through a challenging experience that kind of pushes their independence, but it also really builds up their skill sets in a number of ways. So I'm definitely pro grad school, but maybe there's others who have some other opinions on that.
Erica, how about you? Are you pro grad school?
Well, I'm also in science, so I am even right now thinking, I'm like at that crossroad of, do I want to go through PhD and put in another 5 to 6 years, or am I happy with my master's and just in the next 5 to 6 years transfer into industry? So I am kind of like I'm still developing, as I say, my 5-year plan. It's still to be seen, but I agree with Daiva completely. You have to take opportunities and just try different things. I knew as an undergrad that I wasn't really drawn to traditional lab experiences. So like wet lab and working with mice or working with worms. Like I just had way too many pets growing up that I just was like, I do not want to hurt an animal. That's not gonna be me. And then when this idea of, there's entire data science portion of genetics that's called computational biology, why don't you go there? And I was like, great. If I delete an Excel file, it's gonna be clear on my soul. I am happy with that. So I went into computational biology, and it just opened my mind, and I just fell in love with it. But because I loved science and I loved computers and I loved math, so it was like a concoction of everything. And then, as Daiva also mentioned, when you have great mentors, it helps you a lot to go to the next step. So I had all through undergrad and grad school, I had amazing mentors that had that gave me a lot of opportunities were able to put me on different projects that actually got published, and that we were able to present posters and go to conferences, and it was amazing experiences. And I think you have to experience both the good, and then you see kind of the harder, the not the bad mentors, but like the more challenging mentors. So when I did my internship, that was definitely a much more challenging environment for me. So I think because of that, I'm still pondering PhD, but as being a person in science, for me, it's right now is, I love what I'm doing. Computational biologists are making quite a good salary. So right now I'm thinking, do I want to put in those 5 years and push myself for a PhD? Or do I want to go into industry and just be happy with the master's? Because the master's takes you a lot and a long way.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that about how you feel that you're at a sort of crossroads right now. Before we go to Andros, Lisa, thank you for your comment. Achu. Anybody who is attending, please feel free to ask us questions in the Q&A. We will get to those toward the end of our program here. And if you have any questions for our specific attendees, please feel free to ask them. But Andros, so Erica was talking about, feeling that she's at sort of a crossroads, trying to assess the different opportunities that are available. You've had different opportunities, different fields, as you said.
Right.
How did you know that an opportunity was worth pursuing?
Well, it's part of it's a gut feeling. Part of it is, it's just it's the passion you have. But, I was going to just speak a little bit about grad school. I know Dive and Etika were talking about their experiences. I'm an investment guy, so I look on return on investment. And what that means to me is, if I'm going to spend X amount of dollars on an education, what am I getting out of it? And obviously I'm going to learn things, and that's great. Am I going to get that money back? And I know it maybe sound a little cold, but am I going to get it tenfold, 100-fold back? Is it worth it? And we're at a point in time in the education system, especially in the United States, where tuition is out of hand. Here in Canada, university education is subsidized, so it's more affordable in a sense than in the U.S. I've witnessed, even personally, when I was still doing my bachelor's and master's, that the increases per year were large increases. And now you look at, to get a bachelor's degree, if it costs you $100,000 and you go into debt for that, is it worth it? Are you going to get a job when you get out of school, right? And I think people have to realize, students have to realize that at the end of the day, education is a business, and they're making money off of you as a student. What are you getting from it? Are you gonna be able to get a job out of college or university, right? And maybe that means not necessarily right away. You jump from bachelor's to a master's, and that may make sense. Again, it depends on what path you're taking and the career choices you're making, right? So for me, it made sense to take a few master's level courses to get that experience and to get my feet wet and go, yeah, you know what? Okay, this makes sense to me. I'm going to be able to get a job. And I was fortunate, the employer at the time, Deutsche Bank, fully paid for my master's degree. So, but the ironic thing is that I went to, get another job internally, and I couldn't get another job with the master's degree. I had to leave Deutsche to go somewhere else. So they funded my education, and we're like, yeah, okay, sorry to see you leave, but that's sometimes how it goes. But basically, I don't think it's a simple answer to the whole master's question. But again, I think if it has to make sense. You have to take a hard look at it and go, am I going to benefit from this? And, for some people, it's purely just, I have a quest for knowledge, and that's great, right? But we're talking career. So will that translate into, you know, you earning more money down the road? Will it translate into career progression down the road? I mean, I could go get a PhD in economics and, you know, I could get it, but will I be able to get a job doing that? I don't know. And will I get a salary increase? I don't know. But again, I don't have the passion for that either. So I'm not thirsting for that. I enjoy what I do. So, and what I do didn't require a master's degree. So it's helpful, absolutely. But that's such a personal thing. And I think, you know, and even the bachelor's degree, I think nowadays you have to take a hard look at it. There's been a lot of talk about the trades and those sort of careers, and there's no shame in that. When our parents and grandparents came from Lithuania, it was drilled upon all of us that you have to go to university, you have to get that bachelor's degree because of the circumstances at the time. They wanted us to succeed. And that was the right choice at that time. But now, I don't know, you know, so, but I'm not saying education's overrated and shouldn't be done. I'm saying, I think you have, depending on what your passion is and which direction you want to go, you have to take a hard look at it. It's not always university is the right answer.
Can I just respond? Because Andro, I agree completely with what you're saying. And it's nice to get the other perspective, right? Because here I am with my academic bias. But one thing I will say, just having been a prof now for a few years and getting trainees who are sort of like, oh, I'm finishing my bachelor's, I don't know, should I do a master's? There are those floaters who are kind of like, I don't know if I need this, but maybe I'll just do it anyway. Obviously, if you have the money, and you feel like it's okay. But if money is an issue, then absolutely I wouldn't invest something into something that's sort of a question mark into where it's going to get you. And absolutely I wouldn't do a PhD. Like if you do the master's and it's kind of like, don't think I'm going to go on with this. Like it's definitely a PhD would not be appropriate if you really don't think that you will stay in a research-based career. So nice point, Sandra.
Sure.
Yeah, those are really great. And certainly the financial aspect of this is a major one because grad school is not cheap, certainly in the United States. And actually that's a great segue to what will be our webinar topic for the next one. That will be next month. And that will be about certain scholarships that are available to us through different Lithuanian organizations. We'll have more on that, coming up in the next week or so. So for all of our attendees, please stay tuned and please tell your friends because we really want to provide those opportunities. But Evelina or Dainius, there were really great points that were just raised by Andros, by Daiva. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add from your perspective?
Sure. Excellent. Dave made an excellent point. Andros made an excellent point. And I'd like to talk a little bit about specifically my field because I think international relations is one of the broader fields that there is. And I think a lot of people are thinking that they know the issue area that they're interested in, like, oh yeah, I'm interested in human rights or international development or international security, but they don't really think about what kind of career trajectory are you interested in taking. So I think before you are considering even a bachelor's degree, it's worth spending time soul searching and thinking about, are you interested in working for the government or are you interested in international organizations, think tanks? Would you like to pursue research as your career? And I think that really answers whether you should go for those advanced degrees because for research positions in international relations and social sciences, for that matter, you almost definitely need a PhD. For government positions, it really varies, but for international organizations, you do need master's degrees. Well, and also researching your schools really well. I know it's easier said than done, but do all you can. Reach out to people who are already either enrolled in the universities that you're interested in or programs you're interested in, or even faculty administration, any information you can get, because for international relations, it really depends which school you are going to go to, because the programs are, some are stronger, some are weaker for certain areas, and it's very, very, very important to know where you're getting into, because that will make a huge difference. It does not have to be the biggest school. It does not even have to be an Ivy League school. And I'm very happy to talk to, if we have any international relations people, after the webinar, and to sort of give my perspective and my knowledge, what I've learned in my path, and to sort of help guide you if that could be helpful.
Thank you for offering that, Evelina. And I think, all of us, we're getting some great comments in the chat here. I think all of us would like to help those who are interested in our specific fields. So, please feel free to reach out to us afterwards through our JAV LJS contact information that Emma will provide at the end of the program. And that's, again, one of the goals of this, is so that way those who are recent high school graduates, college graduates, just starting their careers, maybe we can find them mentors in their specific fields and find them other opportunities. So wanted to see if we could move on to another point about strategies for continuing your career development while you're in your profession. So for me as a lawyer, we are required to do continuing legal education credits. Some other professions have similar requirements. We're required to do a certain number of hours every year to just, continue staying up on what's going on in the legal profession. There are also other opportunities, like for example, with me, there's the Federal Communications Bar Association, the Telecom Bar, essentially for other telecom lawyers. There are other professional associations like that. But maybe quickly, because we're getting close to 10 o'clock, I think we can go over it a little bit. But does anybody have any good examples of other ways that you've continued your professional development in your own careers?
Yeah, so in my profession, there's a lot of certifications you have. As you mentioned, you guys have to read up on what's going on from a legal perspective, and from my perspective, I have to ensure that I'm understanding compliance requirements. I have a understanding of what the work I need to do and how I'm safely handling equipment, or that I'm certified to handle certain chemicals and products. And then on top of that, I spend a lot of time in the car. Well, when you're in the car, a great thing to listen to is podcasts. So, there's a number of podcasts that are available that are, on my industry, or on sales, or on, team building, and I'll just play those while I'm, and that's an informal way just to, develop your knowledge. You never know what you may learn, whether it's from a professional setting or a personal setting, on personal finance, or a topic you enjoy. A podcast is a great resource. And nowadays, you can find a podcast on just about any topic. But it really varies from industry to industry. But from my experience, in just about any field, you really need to do lifelong learning or continuous learning, which is never stop. You can always learn something new, and the field is always changing. Your industry is always changing. Your company is always changing. Your position is always changing. I look at most of our parents, and a lot of them, they were in college using typewriters or early computers. Nowadays everything is being through a video call like this webinar. Years ago that wasn't a thing, and nowadays people are having phone conversations or video conversations on a regular basis, to stay connected with their company. So you really don't ever want to stop your education, whether it's formal or informal. Andres took some college courses just to experience or expand his knowledge, and get his certification in financial planning. I'm going to be applying and going through the process of getting certified in industrial water treatment. You have to have at least 5 years of experience to be able to do that, but that's something that you build up to that experience, and you go through their whole training program, and then you finally sit down for an examination just to get a certificate. So there's always something, whether it's in your field professionally or if it's in your life personally, you can always learn something new. You should never stop learning.
Yeah, and learning something new can help reveal other opportunities that might be there, whether you're taking some online course or listening to a podcast. Those are other opportunities to make new contacts. And then particularly in my industry, like in my own situation, my current job, I interned there during law school, but then I worked at another trade association for about 4.5 years. But then my current job came about because of networking. I think I told the story on the last webinar, but I ended up being at an industry event and struck up conversation with the guy who ended up becoming my boss, and they had a position that was open. So these sorts of things can happen, and I think it's really important just to be open to potential opportunities that are out there, but to continue making new connections. And I wanted to see if maybe anybody had other experiences like that.
Yeah, you and I just was going to jump in here and just say, in terms of the continuing education piece, yeah, it's totally industry specific and role specific. I've worked in financial services for over 20 years now. I've been licensed in the US and Canada. And in both those roles, like you said, Dinah said you both said there's continuing ed credits you have to take. I mean, the industry is changing constantly. In my role now, I'm not licensed. However, the firm requires me to take various anti-money laundering courses, all sorts of stuff. So, but I was going to move more into the networking piece of it, and I think that's extremely critical. Especially when you're job hunting nowadays, everything's online. It's not like the old days, and I sound like my grandfather, but it's not like you can walk in to a shop, hand in your resume, and get hired on the spot. It doesn't work that way anymore. And with all the algorithms that are set up with the job searches, it's really tough to get an interview. Most of the time, the gatekeepers set those things so tight, it's tough to even get a resume in front of a recruiter. So I think the key is, and I've learned this, is networking doesn't just mean, on LinkedIn or Facebook. It means anywhere you go, talking to people, and it could be a random conversation, right? And you never know with someone, like I could be talking to Dinus at a Lithuanian event, but then we have a mutual friend maybe who's in financial services, and the ball gets rolling and things happen where you get connected with other people that way. I've been at networking events that have been hosted here in Toronto, and even industry specific events. So if you're into a specific, my field, there's all sorts of events that are run throughout the year by different organizations, financial planning organizations. It's a great way to get involved and in front of people. But even with our Lithuanian community, going to those events, Šokių šventės, any sort of event, it could be big, it could be small, just getting out there, and even volunteering here and there. It's a great way to meet people, and to get your story in front of others. And like, you never know, right? Like, you never know who you're going to bump into, who may become a potential mentor down the road. And again, mentorship, such a big word. I find that sometimes I think people, especially students, think it's this mentor's this godlike person who is going to pave the way for me to my, to this career. A mentor could be someone who just gives you a tip a few times, right? Or is a friend along the way. So I think there's different levels of mentorship too, right? Some in your field, some not. And I have mentors who I've met along the way through Lithuanian organizations, through professional groups, just keeping connections and keeping the conversation going. I think that'll be really beneficial, especially in a job hunt, because it's not so simple.
I completely agree with Andres, and it's like not even the people that you meet, but it's the people that your classmates, the people that you interact with, your professors, their friends. So it takes only one person to give you a lead, and sometimes you can land the job. I know a lot of my classmates, we talk about possible openings. We have LinkedIn groups and alumni associations, and you can even use fraternities or sororities. Right now, networking is the key. Most of the time, job is not found through applying through LinkedIn or Indeed or any of those websites. It's through word of mouth and people seeing you and people actually trusting you and letting you actually come through the door.
I can just quickly add just a small note that I'm a big advocate for professional associations and industry events, conferences, and such. So if you join professional associations, memberships, especially for students, are not very expensive. A lot of times you can even get free memberships. Just identify what those are in your industry. There are so many for nuclear, so many for international relations. Again, I can guide those who are interested in these fields, but if you're just in general for any industry, just be a professional in your professional field, participating in all those targeted opportunities that exist for you.
Thanks for sharing that. That's a great point. I'd like to move to a quick lightning round, and then we'll do a little bit of Q&A and then wrap things up. This has really been a great discussion. I appreciate all of you sharing your insights. So if any of our attendees have any additional questions, go down to the Q&A and ask them, and we'll try to get through maybe 2 or 3 toward the end. But let's do a quick lightning round of what is the best piece of advice that you'd like to share. And I'll let you guys have a second or two, and I'll share one myself, kind of based on what Andres was saying and some of the professional contacts that you make for that, but really for anything else is follow-up. For me, being a lawyer and having worked in fundraising before that, maybe I give somebody like a day or 2, and then I just follow up by email. And sometimes I'll just say, sorry, it's just my training as a lawyer to follow up. But that's really one of the most important things, not just to show your persistence or to try to get something done, but it also helps if you're on the other end, that somebody knows that this is something that's actually important to you. So follow-up is really crucial. Anybody else want to go? Just kind of one quick piece of advice.
I can go.
Yeah, go ahead.
In my field, like I mentioned before, we write a lot and we communicate things through writing all the time. And so even for the job process and applying for positions, it's all through writing. And so people don't know who you are, but they read your application. So you have to be good at coming off the page. So learning how to frame yourself, your strengths, your goals in writing, in my profession at least, is very important. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think my tip, I was told this when I worked at Northern Trust. The biggest career advice I got was if you want to advance at Northern Trust, you have to leave Northern Trust. And at first I was like, what do you mean? And like, it's not always, you don't always progress to the next level. Sometimes you have to make a lateral move. Sometimes you have to take a step back, sort of like a chess game where the pieces don't all move forward every single time. So sometimes to get to maybe the position that you're gunning for may take a move, either internally into another role to gain some more experience, but it's at the same pay grade, or a lower pay grade. Or you may have to leave the firm to go to another firm to get an opportunity. So I think, I've experienced it personally where that is it's an absolute fact where, if you want to get to that, I guess, dream job or whatever that is for you, it's not always a direct path. It may zig and zag around a bit, and just be prepared for that, and be open to that. Some people, I think, pride gets in the way, and they're not willing to take a step back. So that's my biggest piece of advice.
I completely agree with Andres. I essentially through college trained to be a computational biologist, but my initial job at Memorial was as a senior lab tech, because that was my way of getting my foot in the door. And then through there, I could network and talk to people and figure out what I needed to make my next step to a place where I'm right now. So you need to kind of take all of the opportunities as they come, work hard, be prepared to work hard, and just sometimes people in science, we tend to be very shy and don't want to go and talk to people, but we have to absolutely talk to people and figure out, hey, what are you working on? I read your paper, it's really cool. Can you tell me more, like what your group does, or like what you guys are studying, what's coming up next? So you just kind of have to put that foot forward. And once you start interacting, people will love to talk about what they do. So it's always network, and just be open to take a step back, as Andres said, and just take all the opportunities. If it lands you at your dream job eventually, it's worth it. It's just more the knowledge that you have in your toolkit.
Yeah, and going off of that, I would say don't be afraid to tell people that you don't have an answer or you don't know the answer and that you'll get back to them. That is something that I learned in consulting and sales. You know, if you tell them that the answer to something and it is inaccurate, that's the last thing you want a customer to find out, that you're incompetent, or to make them feel you're incompetent, even more so. You know, I've had numerous instances where, you know, someone asked me a question about a topic, especially early on in my career. And the first thing I tell them is, you know, I may not be able to get you an answer right now, but I can get back to you. And then it gives you an opportunity to, you know, do your research. And nowadays with the internet, you know, you could look it up, in most cases, look it up, ask a coworker, reach out to your supervisor or mentor. You know, the last thing you really want to do is tell someone that may not be factually correct, or say something that's inaccurate, because you never know what side effects they may have. You know, so have confidence in that. You know, have confidence in what you do know, and then be confident to be able to say that you don't know something, or that you can follow up with more content, or, hey, I think this may be, you know, what you're looking for. This may be the correct information, but let me double check that and I will get back to you. You know, that has been one of the best tips that I've heard, especially in my industry, in that, you know, you don't have to be the know-it-all, you know, and you don't have to know everything. You have people around you to support you. And in today's age, you know, getting a hold of someone is so much easier than it was in the past.
That's great, Rima.
Okay, I'm kind of going to piggyback off of that, but I'm also going to kind of disagree with you a little bit. I do think, and I've said this before, you know, when you're looking to interview for a job, or you get that job, you should know everything there is to know about your job. You are the expert of what you do. It doesn't matter what it is. And yes, you're not going to know everything. I still don't know everything, and I've been working in my field for 15 years. And so that's always my answer is, let me get back to you on that. I need to look into that, you know, and do some further research before I give you an answer. But that being said, there's always more to learn. If you have opportunities to get certifications, further degrees, whatever it is, because that can only help you in the long run. Not necessarily maybe another degree or school, but like certifications and things like that can go a long way in helping you advance your career.
What I'm going to say may sound obvious, but when you're networking, don't be afraid to tell the person who could potentially give you a job or a foot in the door that you are looking for a job and you are interested in working for them. Not just, you know, it's not effective if you're just picking up business cards and not expressing what is it that you want. It's a little tricky, but it gets easier with practice. So be specific, tell them what you want, tell them what you need. It works. It's not as scary as it may sound.
Yeah, absolutely. Being honest and, as Rima said, being confident in what you know. Dainu said, being confident in what you don't know, not being afraid to ask questions. So we covered a lot of great ground here tonight. Thank you all for sharing your perspectives. Again, our next webinar will be in a few weeks. We're going to be looking at scholarship opportunities, both those that are available to us through different Lithuanian organizations, but then also how to apply for those scholarships and grants. So we hope that all of you will join us again. We'll send out some more information about that. And I'll hand it off to Rima to close us out.
Ačiū, Joanna. Again, thank you to all of our panelists for taking the time out to sit down with all of us and our attendees tonight and give us your sage wisdom and advice. It means a lot to us, and I'm sure it means a lot to them. I'm going to put in the chat section where you can find our email if you have any questions or comments. Also like us on Facebook and Instagram, where we will have more news about the scholarship webinar that's coming up and further events after that, like our Suvažiavimas in November. And that's all for tonight. Ačiū labai.
Ačiū.
Ačiū. See you soon.
Ačiū.
Bye-bye, like this.
Bye, ačiū.
Bye.